At this time, when we are so concerned about events in the world, at this time, when we are so concerned about events in the UK and some events here in Guernsey, and at this time, when pressure on family life has never been greater, it is utterly inspiring and totally uplifting to be invited to be part of the Community Spirit Awards here in Guernsey. The community spirit in Guernsey is not just alive and well, it is positively flourishing. And I am humbled to be invited to be part of your celebration this evening. When I was preparing my notes for what I was going to say tonight, I thought I knew what I was going to say. I thought I knew how I was going to say it. And then in the last 48 hours, two things have happened, two events have happened to make me just change and reflect on what I was going to say, how I'm going to say it, and what risks I'm prepared to take in this community tonight. So the first it's not that exciting, trust me. And the first event was I was sent through the very, very detailed citations of all of the nominees for this evening. And if you haven't read them in detail, you must. If you haven't read the citations for the Charity Award, for the Organising Committee Award, for the Fundraising Award, for the Individual Achievement Award, for the Corporate Social Responsibility Award, for the Youth Award, and for the Overseas Awards, then you must read them because they are absolutely awe-inspiring. What struck me was the extraordinary capacity for the people in this room and the people that you represent to see some of the people on this island that are unseen, to hear some of the people on this island who are unheard, and to reach out and help those whose cries for help are too often ignored. So forgive me if I'm going to come across as a little bit, or as we would say in Scotland, a wee bit evangelical tonight. And forgive me because you have inspired me. You've inspired me to go a bit over the top tonight. But it's your fault because you are fairly inspirational. The second event that happened 2 nights ago when someone said to me, "So tell me, Anne-Marie, why are you on Guernsey? Why do you love Guernsey so much?" And I thought long and hard about it because it's a year since I came to Guernsey when I came for another conference. And I thought, it's absolutely true, because at first Guernsey kind of got under my skin in a nice way. But then it absolutely wormed its way into my heart. So when I thought about it, I thought, why have I taken Guernsey to my heart? Why do I love this island as much as I do? And it's because every place I go in this stunning island, I come across people like you, people who have the biggest hearts, people who have kindness by the bucketful, and people who have shedfuls of decency. You just don't know how good you are. You don't know how much people elsewhere would absolutely give their right arm to be in a community whose community spirit is as alive and flourishing as it is here. So I am going to go over the top at the end, and I need you to do something that doesn't come easy to any human being, but particularly to we who are so reserved. You see before you, my themes for tonight are going to be the whole issue of acts of kindness, random acts of kindness, and small interventions. The second theme is nationhood, and the third theme is celebration. So you see before you the finished article, not quite the finished article, I've still got a way to go, I'd like to think, I'm still learning. But you see before you someone that you think is the finished article. You see someone who was the chief executive of a £250 million charity with 8,000 staff and 14,000 volunteers. You see someone who you think is Social Mobility Commissioner and Child Poverty Commissioner. who got the Aston Martin from Daniel Craig when it was auctioned for Barnardo's. That happens to be one of my major triumphs. And you see before you someone who, with enormous pleasure and enormous humility, was invited to a private lunch with Her Majesty the Queen. And you see me, but you don't see people like you, the thousands, the relentless, tiny little interventions that you made in my life, and the tiny little interventions and acts of kindness that made me who I am today. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I came from Easterhouse. Easterhouse is the worst social housing estate in Europe. It is a byword for poverty, for deprivation, for what you would call the social ills. A child born today in Easterhouse has a life expectancy of 10 years less than a child born in the Gaza Strait. I was very, very lucky because I had loving and adoring parents who believed in me. I was even more lucky because I was surrounded by people like you who saw me, saw my potential, and saw what I could do, and in small, tiny ways helped me. And so I want to give you one example of when I was the ages between 6 and 7. My teacher was Mr. Fraser. Mr. Fraser was a very good teacher, but he was more importantly a very great man. And in this desert that was Easterhouse, in these cold, grey classrooms with nothing to see or nothing to do, Mr. Fraser decided that he would buy flowers every single weekend and bring them into our classroom on a Monday morning. Because Mr. Fraser knew that we needed beauty in our life. And so every single Monday morning, Mr. Fraser would come in with really interesting flowers that no one had ever even seen before. I tell you that because I cut the whole stalks off the gladioli, because I thought the most important bit was the wee flower at the top. So I just cut it off 3 foot into the stem, cut off. And Mr. Fraser did that small, random act of kindness because he believed that we should have beauty in our lives. You need to understand, I'd only ever seen flowers at funerals and at weddings. I didn't know anybody who'd cut flowers in their house. More importantly, Mr. Fraser made me the flower girl. And so every morning I got to rearrange the flowers. It was my first taste of power, and I kind of never looked back. But 54 years later, I stand before you tonight and talk about Mr. Fraser. Talk about that random act of kindness that has stayed with me my whole entire life. And so you think you sit here as an organisation? You think you sit here for the big things that you do? But there will be hundreds and thousands of people on this island who will remember you, your organisations, your staff, the people you work with, for the small, tiny things that you do. The phrase, the acknowledgement, the ability to see the human being, the humanity that lies behind the people that you work with. My second issue, and let me say this, random acts of kindness are a bit like a muscle. The harder you work the muscle, the stronger it gets. So the harder you work random acts of kindness in Guernsey, the stronger your community spirit will be. My second theme was nationhood. And you are all, every single one of you, and you represent a lot of people in this room tonight. So for the people here and for the people out there, you are the founding members of the greatest nation on earth. Imagination. Because you imagine that you can make a difference. You imagine that the world can be better. You imagine that there can be a different outcome. You believe that the world can be better. You believe that you can make a difference. And you challenge us to make a difference. And you challenge us to change. As I said earlier, I had 14,000 volunteers working for Barnardo's, and every single day I was always reminded that while I had corporate donors and while I had high net worth individuals, I had the 14,000 people that were the greatest donors that you could ever come across, because they donated their time, their energy, their passion, and their commitment to make a difference and be the difference in lives. And so I want to just say to you again and again, celebrate the very, very valuable donors that you have, the people that give you their time and their energy and their commitment. Because while they do not, and they're not seen as provide a public service, because they're not public servants, be in no doubt, they provide critical services to the public on this island. And indeed, for many people, your organisations and the work that you do are the 5th emergency service. Because you see the most vulnerable and you reach out to the most vulnerable. It gives me enormous pleasure tonight that we have a youth award. And it's not just because I've spent a whole lifetime challenging and championing young people. It is because too often in society and in communities, the youth of today are vilified. And if you've worked with as many young people as I have, you will know that the majority of our young people give endlessly to their community. They give endlessly to the others around them. And by way of comparison, there are young people here tonight who are 16 and 18, 16 years of age, and they've given 4 years of voluntary service. They've given a quarter of their life to these communities. A quarter of their living life they've given back to the communities. And so that's why the Youth Award is so important. So be proud of being founding members of the greatest nation on earth, imagination. Guernsey can come 6, and maybe in my thing, Scotland will come down there as well. But imagination is the greatest nation that you have. Your ambitious spirit to be better and to make the difference. And my last comment for tonight is probably the hardest one. And it's hardest because it's about celebration. And we're all fairly reserved in this room. And we're all fairly reserved in our life. And we don't like to put our head above the parapet. And we don't like to big ourselves up. And we don't like to be seen to be getting too big for our boots. Indeed, my mother's mantra to me when I was growing up is, it's nice to be important, Anne, but it's more important to be nice. And that runs through me like a stalk of rock. And so tonight it's difficult to get that skin off that says this is a celebration. This is nothing to be embarrassed about. This is something to be celebrating. So in order to let you shed your inhibitions, I'm going to tell you of one of the most embarrassing stories, one of the most embarrassing events, absolutely right hand up to God, that happened to me. Many, many years ago, I was chosen to be the head of guidance and counselling in the largest further education college in Scotland with 14,000 students. And after the summer recess, I turned up for my first day at the college to be told that the principal of the college liked to meet members of staff individually to say hello. Great, thought I mean, principal was just massive, in terms of how important he was. So I went along, sat outside in his secretary's office, and said, "Oh, Anne-Marie, in you come." So I went in, and he said, "Anne-Marie," I said, "I'm so delighted with your appointment. We're expecting great things of you. This is absolutely marvellous." And he said, "And you're looking very well." And I said, "Oh, thank you." I said, I've been on holiday. I said, "But I've put on a wee bit of weight." And he said, "Whereabouts?" And I thought, that's a bit cheeky. And I said, "Well, the thighs and the hips, actually." And at which point he said, "No, I meant, whereabouts were you on holiday?" And the ground could have opened up. I could have died there and then. And that is an absolute truth. And I tell you that because I beg of you to shed your inhibitions tonight. I beg of you to get rid of that reservation that says we're not going to cheer, we're not going to clap, we're not going to stamp, we're not going to scream, and we're not going to shout. Because you are. Because I am going to be the warm-up act. And this is the bit where we're talking about audience participation. So we've talked about the community spirit, and you belong to what is the Big C Club, the Community Spirit Club of Guernsey. And so I am going to get you in the mood to clap and to cheer and to stamp all of these wonderful people who have been nominated before they come up onto the stage. So I need you to repeat after me. I'm not going to get you to stand up. I could, but that's not that risky. I'm going to get you to say after me, repeat after me. Everywhere you go, people always ask us, who we are, where we come from. So we tell them, we're the big C Club, the mighty, mighty C Club. And if they can't hear you, you shout a bit louder. Everywhere we go, people always ask us, who we are, where we come from. So we tell them, we're the big C Club, the mighty, mighty C Club. And if they can't hear us, they must be deaf. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.